Hey guys, welcome back to the homestead. Today I'm going to be pulling together one of our absolute favorites around here for Chipotle bowls or Chipotle tacos. Sometimes it's nice just fried up and eating a big old bowl of it. So this is my Chipotle beef recipe, and it really depends on what's on sale, depending on what cut of meat I put in there. So you can use brisket, you can use a chuck roast, just about any type of cut that, once you cook it down, it gets that tender pull apart shred to it. So I unfortunately do not have any of my own cows in the freezer, but I do have a local source that I get down the road, that I'm able to get grass-fed, grass-finished beef from occasionally, depending on how their specials run. So when I see them, I stock up and I usually throw them in the freezer. So I've allowed these to kind of defrost down. I haven't gone completely defrosted on these because I like a little bit of the firmness left when I'm cutting the meat, and they'll sit out long enough on the counter while I'm prepping everything else that any residual frozenness will actually go away. But it really does help you cut your meat if there's a little bit of firmness to it. Now, like I said, we usually grow our own beef, and I've had so many people at work ask me how we can do it, right? Because they see the cute little cuddly cows and they just don't understand how I can raise these animals and do this. But honestly, it's more than just raising them. Like, a lot of our beef babies start out as bottle babies that we buy from friends and stuff that we know and trust, and we raise them up here. And so I'm literally going out there to the barn 2 to 3 times a day, taking care of these animals just like they're babies. And I kiss them on their nose and I cuddle with cows. I mean, cows are my absolute favorite of all the animals on the farm. But cows are also very tasty, so therefore I'm quite conflicted. But the good news is I know that my cows have one bad day, just one. They eat the highest quality hay that we can get them. They are cuddled, they are loved, they run around on pasture. We talk to them, we check on them consistently. So I know that when they finally do go to meet their maker, that I have done all I can and be a good steward for them, instead of them growing up in some situation and just going to the store and getting what's available. Now, here's the thing. If that's all you can do, then that's all you can do. But once I started raising them and having that fresh meat that I knew that I personally can be accountable for in my freezer, it was a big game changer for me. But it was hard. I mean, I'm not going to lie. The first bull that we took to the butcher, he was supposed to be, we did sexed semen. He was supposed to be a polled heifer, and he came out a horned bull calf. And he was born on my birthday, first baby born on the farm. And I knew I was going to have to eat him because his mother was my milk cow. So at that time, we were eating the firstborn, and now we don't. But in that same concept, I mean, it was hard for me. When I took that calf to the butcher, I cried the whole way there, and he locked eyes with me the whole way there. So, I mean, it's like they know. But in the end, I knew that I was doing what was best for him. So here I'm just going to chop up the garlic, and what you're going to want to do with your garlic is you're going to want to chop it as fine as you can so it kind of sticks to your meat. Because once we mix all this together, we're going to kind of let it sit for a little while while we prep everything else to kind of marinate. So I'm just going to put the garlic in the bowl, and then we're going to add our chipotle peppers to it. Now, I actually had a friend give me some chipotle peppers in sauce, so I'm using those in this recipe, but they are available at the store. I'll put the full recipe with everything that you can get locally if you don't have your own already canned up on your shelf. But then you're just going to take these chipotle peppers and you're going to slice them as thin and as minced up as you possibly can without taking your fingers out because they are a little slimy. And then you're just gonna, for mine, I just put it in the bowl with the garlic because, again, the bowl that has my meat in it is not big enough to stir everything together in, so I'll have to bring in another pot later. Went and got my spices, and now I'll come back with my big pot. Now here's the thing. If you're going to make this just for dinner, the recipe changes a little bit. Because what I would do is I would braise both sides of my meat in the cast iron pan, in my cast iron Dutch oven, and then I would take that Dutch oven once it had a nice crustiness to it, and I would place it in my oven at about 250 degrees, actually probably about 170 for 4 to 6 hours, so it kind of gets that fall apartness. Now, of course, you can put it in a pressure cooker too, but please sear the meat because it really is a game changer when you're eating it fresh. But then I would take like my peppers and I would cook it with the peppers and the broth and everything in that cast iron pan so it cooks down. And then from there, when you bring it out of the oven and it cools enough to shred it, that's when I would stir in my cilantro. Now, this recipe calls for like fresh cilantro, but if I'm canning it, I don't want to use fresh cilantro. So I use spices and stuff like that, which I'll put everything below for you guys. So it mimics that flavor, but the texture of the canned cilantro, I just can't. So what I actually end up doing is I use the coriander seeds so you get some of the flavor, but then later once I shred it out and put it in my bowls or I put it in my tacos, then I'll put the fresh cilantro with it there. So it does change a little bit if you're making this fresh, but I mean, once you kind of put it together, you see how you would do it if you were making it to eat tonight for dinner. But there is some prep time to it depending on just how slow you want this to cook. So now we have our jars all sterilized and we're just going to fill them up just like we did with all our other containers. Leaving probably about 1.5 inches headspace on these. If you end up with 1 inch headspace, that's fine too, but I'm a little bit more cautious, especially with using a chuck roast because it does make a little extra broth. And so if it's making a little extra broth, I want to leave little extra room just in case, so that way it doesn't siphon. So now you're just going to cover everything with your beef broth. Now, here's the thing. When you go to take this out, if you're going to do rice with it, drain your broth, but hold it and make your rice with some of that broth. And well, it's phenomenal. So you're just going to fill these up, like I said, covering everything nicely. The onions will float to the top, so don't fret thinking that you have to try to get the onions under the level. They'll cook and they'll be fine floating at the top of your canner. Because I chopped mine so small, they're floating now. So then you're just going to make sure that you take all your air bubbles out to ensure you don't have air pockets in there. And I really do just kind of scoop down under the meat and really pick it up and manipulate it to try to get it down. And like I said, your onions are probably going to all pop to the top at this point. But just make sure that your meat is fully covered. That's the important thing. If you have to readjust anything at this point, that's fine. Pull it out, put it in a different jar, add more onions. I still have some onions in my pot if I needed to top it off. But you just want to make sure that meat is covered. And it's not like it would really be too bad because I've had meat pop to the top, but it does get kind of weird when you take it out of the jar later. So if you're a texture person, or especially if this is your first time and you're going to go back and try to look at it later, well, weird meat in your jar would be a big turn off. I did do some Rebel meatloaf a while back, and I had one that turned out really, really, really weird, and I just tossed it. I was like, I'm not even trying. So here, like I said, I'm just going to add the spices to the top because I don't like them in the bottom because, again, like, I don't know. It's a personal preference thing. If you wanted to put them in the bottom and then put your meat on top of them, I really don't think it would hurt anything. But it helps me remember which jars I've added spices to because sometimes my brain likes to forget what I put spices in. So if my spices are at the top, well, then I can literally see that I added the spices to the jar. Now we're just going to wipe the rims to make sure that we have a good seal between our lid and our rim. And then, of course, once we get all our lids on, we'll make sure that we hand tighten down our rims. And again, hand tight for you is probably very different for hand tight for me. Just like hand tight when I'm 85 is going to be very different than hand tight from 45. But all you just want to make sure is that the rims are nice and secure on the top, so that way it holds your lids in place. So you're not trying to crank them down. If you do open it up and you have a whole bunch of buckling and stuff when you start this process, it usually means that you unfortunately have cranked your rims way too far down. So we're just going to now take the olive oil and put it around the edge of the canner lid. This just helps me be able to get it off later. It just adds a little bit of a lubricant. And then we're just going to kind of work around our canner, tightening down in opposite directions. That's how my canner works. Your canner might be different. There's so many different ones on the market. I won't advise you how to use the canner because I don't know which canner that you have. I have the All-American. So then I'm just going to kind of walk around and clean everything up because really the key to canning is clean as you go. That way you don't get into this so many dishes to do later, because I'm telling you, after you've been standing on your feet all day, especially if you're doing mass batch canning, then you're going to be exhausted. Now that the canner is done, we're going to take it back apart and take our jars out. For anybody who was super concerned about me in the other video about my mental block on the kitchen, I did take a day off work and I literally sat in my kitchen and organized it all. I'm going to show you guys a picture at the end of me getting my headspace clear because unfortunately, if my house is severely cluttered, my head is severely cluttered. Somehow they go hand in hand. So getting everything back in its place. I might take pictures, laminate them, and hang them on the walls for the children to have reference points. But for now, I'm living in a clean and organized space. So you're just going to deconstruct your canner here and then take all your jars out and allow them to sit on your counter for, 24 hours to make sure that your seals are nice in place. Label them and then put them on your shelf. And label them is key because you will not be, especially if you did the chicken fajita one, when you put the beef, Chipotle beef next to the fajita chicken, they're going to look very, very, very similar. Now, mind you, they both do well in whatever you're trying to do, but it'll confuse you. So there is my nice and organized, clean kitchen. Thank you guys. Have a nice night.